Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? This Thursday, so last night, I got to play with Eloy and Jose and Eloy's daughter for the first time since, oh man, I guess it was December 23rd. We'd been playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, so we started up again, and Eloy's daughter plays, started up a different character. I got to play my wizard again. Jose got to play his ranger again. We had a lot of fun. It was neat, despite whatever game we're playing, we always have fun, the three of us, and it's fun to play with Eloy's daughter as well. And this video really isn't about that. And another thing it's not about is how skillfully Eloy did info dumps with this gnome sage that he introduced in the gnome sage's manservant or gnome servant, if you will. And it's very difficult when you're a game master to effectively do banter between two NPCs, and he did this really, really well. And he made this gnome very tiresome to listen to. And it was very easy to be in character and kind of letting him know he was talking too much, but he was able to present a lot of information. So it was a neat way to do that. So really, really skillful, a lot of fun. This video is not about that either. We start talking afterwards about things in the rules. And Jose is one of those guys, if you watched us play, and if you heard me talk about playing with Jose, he reads the game and he finds like all these rules and understands how the game works much faster than anybody else. And he's talking about the neat thing about throwing weapons and, how you can use your strength or dexterity modifier and how, it's advantageous as being a fighter, you can, throw bigger weapons and using strength and all sort of stuff. And, but we start talking about various rules in combat, and it got me thinking about some stuff that's been going on in my game with the kids, where I'm wondering, am I being too hard on them? Am I not being lenient enough? Am I not saying yes enough? And so, and we start talking about the rules that I'm going to cover here, and I know from experience that, once I put this video up, people are going to start saying, well, you got to be able to use common sense and house rule and make judgment calls. I understand that. I've been doing this for a long time. But that's not what this video series and examination of 5e D&D is about. It's about, what do these rules actually say? What do they not say? What is the book telling us about stuff? So anyhow, when I'm talking to my friends yesterday, I'm talking about things like, it's odd because I've got these kids now, they're about 5th level. There's a couple of them are 3rd level because they started later. And they're doing all sorts of things like, shooting into combat. And, the Rangers have 2 attacks now. And they're declaring various actions. And sometimes I'm saying, well, no, that's probably too much. You can't do that. But having done some examination of the rules or going over stuff in preparation and doing some fact checking for some of the other videos I've been doing and talking about the action economy and whatnot, I started thinking, gosh, I don't think I'm seeing what I'm saying in the rules. And we're talking about things like firing into melee. And, a couple of the children are doing this quite frequently, firing into melee. And, Jose mentioned something about playing another game where somebody has a sharpshooter feat. And so I looked, at sharpshooter. So let's start, perusing around the book a little bit. And so that's one of the feats. And pretty much you've mastered ranged weapons and you don't impose disadvantage on attack. You don't get disadvantage at long range. And then it says, more importantly, your ranged weapons ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. So you can shoot into cover and not take penalties. Also, if you look at what cover actually is, that includes creatures that might be standing in front of the target. So many creatures, in fact, that they're giving them half cover or 3/4 cover. It doesn't say you're going to hit them, but it says at this point they get +2 or +5 to their armor class. I'm wondering, should I do that? Are there really that many creatures or their friends in front of the creatures they're trying to attack? Or are they all kind of dancing around? Because very often I'm thinking, well, there's 8 people that can fit around another person. Is that really half cover or 3/4 cover? Or do the rules really not speak about that if they've got one of their friends sitting there just, whacking away at them? I don't know. Then so we're looking a little bit more at the rules as we're talking about this. And so I'm looking at, ranged attacks in close combat. And so it says somewhere around like page 195, because now we're in the combat section here, and I've got a whole bunch of bookmarks because this got to be fun after a while. It's like page number 195, and it's talking about shooting, at close, range attacks at close range. And close range is like within 5 feet, so you're in melee range. And at that point, well, you've got disadvantage. That's it. It doesn't mean that, if it's a hostile creature and they can see you. Hopefully they can see you. Other than that, you're shooting your bow and they're right there and you probably should have been using your sword anyway. But it doesn't say anything about shooting into melee. So we're looking at that going, that's really kind of interesting. Because very often that's what these kids want to do. And last night my wizard was popping off, fireballs at, a harpy that was, carrying up, one of our little halfling, companion. What the heck is he? He's a sidekick. And, it was okay to do that. And not... And, didn't take any penalties for that. And I haven't necessarily had the kids take penalties, but sometimes I said, well, it might be a little hard. Maybe the rules don't really say that. Maybe I should let them do that. And then the other thing I've started to notice very frequently, because now the Rangers have 2 attacks, they're 5th levels, they start to want to be able to run around, and you can move between attacks. It even says on page 190, you can do that. You can move between attacks. That's okay. But they wanted to say, let's attack 2 different people. Or maybe I want to shoot with my bow and then draw my sword and attack somebody else. And I've been saying, well, you really can't do that. You can't, because very often like the kids are doing things like they want to do ensnaring strike or hail of thorns. And then I do that to this one guy and then I'm going to grab my sword and grab, whack somebody else and say, well, it's probably too much. Is it? Because I start to look at, do the rules say you can't attack 2 different people? You can't switch weapons? What are they actually saying? So you can move between attacks. That's okay. There's nothing in the rules that say you can't attack 2 different people. I checked. I looked at like the extra attack on page 72 for the fighter, and it doesn't say anything about you have to attack the same person. The Horde Breaker, that's not a feat. What the heck is it? It's just path that the Ranger takes. One of the abilities the Ranger can take, which Jose takes. Well, it says if you attack somebody as a Horde Breaker using your attack action, you can attack somebody adjacent to them within 5 feet. But that's an extra attack you get for free. That's not part of your attack action. It doesn't say anything about if you've got 2 attacks now, that you can't hit 2 different people. In fact, I decided, well, let me go look a little bit deeper. Maybe it says something elsewhere. So I looked at the Monster Manual, one of those places, a go-to place every once in a while for rules. And multi-attack, talks about multi-attack on page 11, doesn't say anything about the creature having to, attack the same person. So I said, well, let's go to the Troll. Because a Troll is one of those things where, why is a Troll like one of my go-to things? Well, on the first edition Monster Manual, it never said anything about things like ghouls and all these various things that do the claw bite, that they, could only attack 1 person. But when you get to the entry about the Troll, it says it can make 3 attacks, claw bite, and can attack 3 different targets. And so then you think to yourself, we were 11 or 13 years old going, I guess that means that the ghoul has to make all the attacks towards 1 person, but the Troll can do it to various people. Well, I checked the Troll, page 291. It says he gets 3 attacks. Doesn't say anything about he can attack different people. So it seems that if you've got a couple attacks, you can attack a couple different people. There's nothing wrong with that. So I shouldn't be telling the kids they couldn't do that. But then what about switching weapons? So now we're going back to page 190 again, because we're talking about interacting with objects, aren't we? We're talking about drawing your sword after you've shot your bow, and, what can you do here at this particular point? Now, it says here, let's see, it's page 190, I believe, is where it talks about using an object. Yes, it says use object. And we've talked about this quite a bit, in the action economy. And so you can use an object for free as part of your attack action or as part of your move, right? Okay, cool. And one of the things you can do, in fact, the very first thing it says is draw or sheath a sword. So, if that's the thing that you can do for free as part of your attack or your action or your move, then it seems like you could do one or the other. So I guess maybe the kids can't put their shoulder their bow and draw their sword and attack somebody else, right? But can they just drop their bow? You can release a grapple for nothing. So I'm thinking to myself, gosh, if you can drop a bow or release a grapple for nothing, you should be able to drop your sword or drop your bow for nothing, right? And then run to somebody else and make a second attack because you've got 2 attacks now. You're a 5th level ranger, right? Okay. But geez, we don't really narrate, often dropping our bow or dropping our sword and attacking somebody else with the other weapon, do we? Somehow they switch weapons all the time. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I guess maybe they can't do that. But then consider the following. Here, I'm Bill Nye the Science Guy. Consider the following. Very often, let's say before these guys were 5th level, what do we do? How do we narrate this? How have we narrated this for years? I'm shooting my bow at somebody, right? I'm using my action to do that. Let's say I'm playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. They're getting closer and closer. And finally, okay, well, next round, it's time to draw my sword because we're getting into melee range. We've closed, haven't we? Okay, fine. I don't narrate, I drop my bow, do I? Somehow, I shoulder my bow, and I take my sword out. However, as part of my action, I can only do one of those things. Then the other thing becomes my action because it's this interacting with the environment. Unless maybe you could say that, at the end of shooting my bow, I have to then narrate that my interact with object is going to be put my bow back on my shoulder or something, or sheath my sword. I have to remember to do that, right? Or else you just have to drop it at the beginning of the next round, maybe. Or do we just kind of hand wave that one and we switch weapons for nothing? And then we can do that in between rounds, right? Because very often we do. Very often, like, we're constantly, throwing hand axes, and I'm going to hit him with my sword next, trying to shoot my bow because this guy's further away because it's the next round. Well, if you have 2 attacks around, couldn't you then switch weapons? The rules say you can't do that or can do it. It seems on a read that the rules probably say you can't. But it seems also on a read that maybe the rules say that if you want to switch weapons next round, unless you narrate it, or if you've done something else with an object, you just got to drop your sword or drop your bow. Just leave it there. These are kind of things that we talk about, and I look in the rules and say, it's kind of interesting what it says and what it doesn't say. So am I being too restrictive on the kids? Am I being too lenient? Or is it somewhere in between? And what I've kind of noticed overall, now that if you've stayed with me for 11 and a half minutes, I might say this in a different video, is it seems in general that this game, or this version of the game, very much doesn't want to step on you or squash you or stop you if you can do a thing. If you can shoot firebolts, then there's nothing in the rules that are going to say you can't do that thing. If you're the rogue or somebody that's really good at shooting from a distance, and maybe you get sneak attack because they're already engaged with somebody else, right? Or you're hiding and they can't see you, you should be able to do that thing. And, the game isn't going to stop you just because they're in melee with somebody else. If you're running around and you have 2 attacks, it's not going to stop you from running around and attacking 2 different people on your turn. It may won't even stop you from switching weapons. And overall, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. The game seems to be in favor of if you can do a thing, it's not going to get in your way. I don't know. What do you think about all that?